Welcome to episode 2 of the official Masonic podcast for the province of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight.
And welcome.
Roddy, they've let us come back for another episode.
That's a win. I'm so happy.
I thought it would be one and done. I really did.
All right. So what's on the table today, James?
Well, I think the first thing to talk about is a very important update. Listeners who tuned into our pilot episode a couple of weeks ago will know that we have a competition running to select the official name of this podcast, because we don't have one yet, and we really need to have one. And we asked our listeners to pop their suggestions in the comments of wherever they're listening to this podcast. And I've got to tell you, Roddy, the names have been coming in.
It's so creative,
thick and fast. And there are a lot of good suggestions that need to go in front of the PGM, and possibly one or two that he will never see.
You know what? So much allegory in these names. I love it, guys. Keep them coming. Do keep them coming.
We're going to have that name selected by the PGM in time for episode number 3, which is going to be a real banger of an episode. But for the time being, we are still the official Masonic podcast of the province and Hampshire of the Isle of Wight. But keep those names coming in, because today we've got a very special episode, haven't we?
You know what? You're so good saying that. I can't say that. Thank God for to be able to say that. I'm not even going to attempt that. But yes, we do have a really fantastic episode for you guys. And James, I'll let you introduce it.
So we mentioned in the last episode that this podcast comes to you with the kind permission of the Provincial Grand Master for the province. And he is, of course, the Right Worshipful Brother Jonathan Whitaker. Roddy, you were fortunate enough to sit down for 90 minutes, 2 hours with the Provincial Grand Master very recently. And he shared with us, or he shared with you, his thoughts on Masonry in the province. He talked about his journey through Freemasonry, and he talked a lot about where I think he wants to see Freemasonry move in the future. So it's our pleasure now to bring that interview to you, brethren. It's a long interview, so we've split it into 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But you're about to hear the first half. Roddy, what was it like sitting down with the PGM?
It was brilliant. Such an amazing brother to have in our great fraternity. There's so much goodwill and just the love of Freemasonry that this person breathes, sleeps, everything. You'll hear it when it comes out, and when you start hearing this episode. And without further ado, you're gonna hit the man.
When Roddy met the PGM. Here we go.
With that, I'll start with welcoming the Provincial Grand Master, John Whitaker. It is a pleasure to have you here. I'm excited because this is a long time coming. Let's just have this conversation. We are, I think the brethren of Hampshire and Isle of Wight are just so curious to know about the face of Freemasonry in Hampshire. Who is John Whitaker?
Well, Roddy, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me. When I got the email a couple of months ago, I wasn't quite sure what I was letting myself in for. But I'm glad that we're here today, and I have an opportunity to have a conversation, really. And I will try and answer it. But I will be honest, and then if I go off piste, you'll have to call me back. But Provincial Grand Master sounds very grand. I mean, the way I always look at it is that, I head up this amazing voluntary organisation, which I've been part of for 37 years. And I was initiated 37 years ago this month in a small village lodge in Hartley Witney, just off the A30, past Basingstoke. And when I reflect on that time, I knew nothing about Freemasonry. There was no website, social media, mobile phones were, no one really had a mobile phone. So I couldn't really research it. So I only knew sort of folklore and what my family and people had told me. But I got into Masonry because I was involved in an organisation called Rotaract.
Okay.
Rotaract was like a junior Rotary club, similar to Round Table. And one of the Rotarians was a Freemason. And we were doing projects in the villages around Hartley Witney. And I'd had an uncle who was as a Freemason. And in fact, my father is a Freemason. But I moved up from Devon to Hampshire. And I decided to go alone, and I found myself being initiated at 21 years old and to a lodge which had about 60 members. I suddenly had all these dads and granddads surrounded me. I was the youngest in the lodge by about 20 years. The next oldest to me was in his 40s. And I was very much the baby of that lodge. But they took me in, and they sort of, put their arm around me and encouraged me. And the only reason I'm doing this job is because of my mother lodge and the welcome that I received and the support that I had. And in fact, 4 guys in particular who really, really, really looked after me. And I mean, we didn't have mentors in lodges in those days. We didn't have the role of mentor, but in fact, they were looking after me. A couple of them tried to marry me off to their daughters, but they weren't successful in that. I used to get lots of invitations to dinner, and I suddenly realised what was going on. But they became lifelong friends, and from that experience I had, I absolutely loved it.
It's very interesting you talk about the mentorship, because I think it's such an important part of Freemasonry. I don't know if it gets mentioned or not in the way of mentorship. And I see your long list of accomplishments professionally and also in service. I'd like just to name a few.
Sure.
I know that you were in HR for Sainsbury's for 33 years.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Which is, I just find it absolutely fantastic that you've been with the company for so long, and just means that you're just so happy there. And it was a great organization. But then I start seeing that you're a reservist in the Army in mentoring, coaching, also the HR advisor for Hampshire Scout Advisory Committee, the county president for Hampshire St. John's Ambulance, and now recently the High Sheriff of Hampshire. I think that's really impressive. And when I see that list, I'm like, this is because of Freemasonry as well, like just being in service. But it goes hand in hand with these, why you volunteer so much. Like, what is it that you get from volunteering and being so active in the community? Not just not Freemasonry, but in these other organizations that help out so many people.
I think, it goes back to childhood, if I'm honest. We grew up, I've got 2 younger sisters. Ironically, one lives in my village and the other one lives about 20 minutes from my village. So we were brought up in a lovely market town in Devon, and I joined youth organisations. So I joined the Sea Scouts, I joined the swimming club, I joined the youth club, and I was always out. I was always out doing stuff. So it was in my blood. My parents were very supportive. So my dad was very involved in supporting on the Sea Scout committee, and the Parent Teachers Association at the school. My mum was involved in running the brownies and guides. So we've got that in our roots.
Yes. Okay.
So I can remember as soon as I joined, I've tended to stay with organisations. JW is not just for Christmas, he tends to be for life.
Okay. So
I tend to stay. And longevity in things is probably gives you, lots of experience. I like that. I suppose even at a young age, I like the team stuff.
Okay.
I like getting on with people. I like the fellowship. I suppose a bit of competition in the sort of Sea Scouts. We were very active. We rowed, we sailed, we canoed. We were recognised by the Admiralty, so we had an annual inspection that we had to sort of do parading and drill for.
Okay.
And if we did it well, we got a check from the Royal Navy, and suddenly we had 6 new canoes every year. And so it was stuff like that. But the ethos, I suppose, was put in my head at a very young age. And then as I got older, I took more responsibilities in those organisations.
Okay.
So I became a swimming teacher. I later became an assessor for swimming teachers in and a judge at, swimming competitions and stuff. In the Sea Scouts, I became a Queen Scout. I did my Scout leader stuff. So I just grew with the organisation.
I see.
And that's a little bit like Freemasonry. And when I moved away from home after college, I joined Sainsbury's. I didn't know anybody. So I came to Basingstoke, and I initially went into digs in those days. I was on a training program for 18 months. And so I filled my evenings by joining stuff like I used to do. So I went and taught swimming, and I helped out the local scouts. And so it just carried on.
I see.
And then someone said to me I then got involved with the Air Force at RAF Odium, where in fact I was last night, wearing a high sheriff's hat, but that's another story. And I joined something called the Royal Observer Corps, which was like a civil defence unit, part of the Air Force. And so I did that. That was a cross between the Territorial Army and Dad's Army, really. It was a strange organisation. So I was involved with that. We were based at RAF Odium. And then I got involved with that. That eventually closed. I then was involved in Rotaract and Round Table.
Okay.
And then this is where the connection came in. And the Rotarian that was a great friend of mine said, look, come and join Freemasonry. And then I was initiated. But it all goes back to my childhood. It all comes back to being involved in things. And I'm not very good at saying no.
As we see now, right?
I'm not good at saying
I don't think Masons are good at saying no, right? When you say yes.
But I couldn't do it without Lynn, because when we got married, I was a Freemason.
Okay.
And
how do you explain your Freemason life to your family? Because I think that's one of the things that sometimes the brethren might I don't want to say struggle. It's just difficult to explain, because you have your family duties, you have your job, your work duties, but also you have this organization that you love so much. But there are times where you can't include your family because it's just a lodge meeting. And how do you juggle that? Because you seem like you're such an active person within the community, within the county, even in London as well. How do you juggle the family and these other responsibilities, or even time for yourself? That's one of the things that I observe with really active Freemasons. I'm like, wow, for me, it's just like you and the people that run the organization. I mean, the brethren that run the organization, like, you're the heroes. Like, oh, where's the time coming from? The balance.
Yeah. I wouldn't use the word hero. I have a different view on what a hero is. And I think it's overused some days, but that's just, I just need to throw that as an aside. You've got to be excellent at managing time. You've got to be organised. You've got to want to do it. And the want, if there's a want to do it. I mean, why do brethren spend hours and hours and hours with their head in a blue book?
Yeah. Or
a red book or a green book, depending on which order you're in. And they do it because they want to deliver something for the candidate. So everything we do is for the candidate, for new members. And actually, why would you not want to do it well? So if you have people around for dinner in your house, you don't get out a chip mug, do you? Or a chip plate. And you put on a bit of a show. And in a way, that's what we do. Or that's what we try and do our lodges and our chapters. We try to put on a show. And it's to try and give that person joining that amazing experience, not just of the ceremony, but of a sense of belonging. And it's because people care. And people say to me, oh, why don't we just read the ritual? And I said, some ritual is read in some orders, but you need to read it well if you're going to read it, because it has to be meaningful.
Yep.
But in terms of doing all this stuff, if Lynn was here, she'd say, I drive her mad, because I'm an early bird. So 6 in the morning, up at 6 in the morning, I'm on the laptop, I'm doing my emails, I'm sorting stuff out, and then I've got my day. But I used to work like that, and that's how I worked. I'm not very good at switching off.
Okay.
She never understands, for me, going to lodge meetings relaxing, because she says you're always performing, you're always doing something. I actually find it very relaxing. I find a lodge meeting, yes, I might have to do a speech, I may have to do some ritual, but I find that relaxing. That is my hobby. Some people find running relaxing.
Yeah.
Playing squash relaxing. I find going to masonry relaxing. I do worry about it, and I do prepare for stuff. But to me, my happiest times, I mean, I've been blessed in a Masonic journey, but my happiest times were as a lodge secretary. So for 10 years, I was lodge secretary of one lodge, and then I did some other lodges. I used to get to the meeting an hour and a half before. There was just me. And the caterer would come in, make me a cup of tea, and put it on the secretary's table. And I'd have probably 45 minutes to myself before anybody arrived.
Why is that?
There was total silence.
Yeah.
Right.
Just well.
And part of it for me was just switching off from work,
Okay.
getting myself organised, getting the minute book out, getting the register out, making sure stuff is around, not interfering with what the Tyler or the DC or anybody else, but just getting myself organised, getting my headspace right.
Getting in the zone.
Getting in the zone, yeah, getting in the zone. And just having quiet time. Because you knew, as soon as people arrived, the lodge secretary, have you got this? Have you got that? What's happening? How many people are dining? What? And all the questions come flowing out. So those 3/4 of an hour in the early days, for me, were really special. And it was a bit of contemplation, relaxation, but also being prepared. And I really love that time, and I still do. I always try and get to meetings early because I enjoy that time, just soaking it all in.
And now that has changed. Now that, there, of course, has been a journey to become Provincial Grand Master.
Yeah.
And one question that I've heard so much in the last couple of years that I've been a Mason is, how do you become a Provincial Grand Master? How do you land that responsibility? Because it's an amazing title to have, but I know there's so much work to me that falls on your shoulder.
Yeah, I think you have to be lucky. You have to be lucky in terms that you have to have people, we said earlier, mentoring you. I never had any ambition other than being master of the lodge. So when I was initiated, when I was working through the offices in my lodge, and the master was spouting all this stuff from what seemed nowhere, I was so impressed. And I always thought I'd love to be able to do that. So my ambition was always to be a master and no more.
Okay.
When I became the master in my lodge, I had these 3 or 4 guys looking after me. And one of them was the lodge secretary at the time. And he said to me, when you come out of the chair, what are you going to do? And I said, I've no idea. He said, you're going to be the lodge secretary. I said, am I? He said, oh yeah, we've sorted it out. And I went round to his house and the director of ceremonies was there. And it was a pincer movement, a bit like I do now in the province with people. So I sat there as the master in the chair, and I had the DC sat one side and the secretary, and they said, you're going to be lodge secretary. You're going to install your successor, and then you're going to go straight in as secretary. You'll be IPM at the festival, but you're going straight as secretary. And then the current secretary was going in the chair. And that's how it was done.
That's how it was.
And I have to say, it was a baptism of fire. I was worried to death about it. But if I reflect back, and I've been secretary of about 6 units now, it was my absolute learning curve. And then, of course, as lodge secretary, you saw the other side, the governance, the administration. Mm-hmm. I had interaction with the provincial office. We're sat in provincial office here today. I remember being scared walking through the door coming in to see the provincial grand secretary, Nigel Buckingham at the time, because he was such this big iconic figure. I came into the office and he sat down with me and he went through the lodge file, 240 lodges, and he went through the lodge file and he said, I think we need to update your bylaws. I said, right, how do I do that? So I then had an interaction with the office. I was made a provincial grand steward the year after I came up with the chair. So someone, each lodge in those days had a visiting grand officer. We have visiting officers now. And the visiting grand officer we saw twice a year. And he looked after 3 or 4 lodges. And he nominated me to be a provincial steward. So I was one of the 16 or 17 in my year, which was in 1995, so 30 years ago next year. I became provincial steward, and I joined Provincial Stewards Lodge. I don't think I was a very good provincial steward because I didn't join the lecture team, which everybody was joining. And I joined the almoners team because I have an interest in welfare and people. But I wasn't very good provincial grand steward, I don't think, because I was so busy doing other stuff, working and lodge secretary and other orders. And then my big break came really 4 years after that in 2000, when the then Provincial Grand Master, a chap called Ernest Moss, asked me to be the Provincial Junior Warden. And I was 33 years old. And I thought, I can't do it.
But why is that? Why do you?
I didn't.
why'd you have that
I just felt that it was like, wow, I'd grown up with everybody older than me in Freemasonry, but the age never really bothered me, if I'm honest. But I had real imposter syndrome. I thought, I can't do that. And as a warden, you have to do your own visits. You're over your own DC taking you out. I thought, I can't do it. And again, what happened is I came down to this office and the provincial secretary was still there, Nigel Buckingham. And I wasn't allowed to tell anybody I'd been offered this job. And Ernest Moss said, go and see the provincial secretary and he'll give you some advice. I sat in this very room where we are, and he walked in. The difference where we were in suits and ties in those days, not casually dressed like we are today. And he walked in and he said, congratulations. He said, let me talk you through what you've got to do. And he spent an hour and a half with me, which I will never forget. And really, he helped me and said, I can give you some standard letters. I can, let me give you some advice on what you say in your speech at the festive board. It was, and I guess that was a one-off piece of mentoring. And for me, that gave me an opportunity. So they were looking at me. I did that job for a year. And then 4 years later, I was made a Grand Officer. So I looked after 3 or 4 lodges. I then became a group representative. And in those days in this province, we were divided into 12 administrative groups. So there were 12 group reps. And I looked after between 20, 25 lodges.
Okay, wow. That's a big responsibility.
And again, I was 37, 38. And then I had to chair the meeting of the Grand Officers to look at the provincial appointments or the appointments in our area. And I remember, people walking in who I'd sort of really looked up to and admired and respected. And I thought, why am I chairing this meeting? And again, I had a bit of a worry about it. And one of the old boys said to me, just get in sandwiches and cake. And he said, you'll be fine. So the first meeting I chaired with the Grand Officer, I got in sandwiches and cake. And they walked through the door and they said, oh, we've never had sandwiches.
The key,
what? It worked.
Key to a Mason's heart, the food.
So I was a group representative, and so there were 12 of us across the province.
Yes.
I did that for 6 years, and the Provincial Grand Master who took over was from Ernest Moss, was Brian Bellinger, and then when Michael Wilkes, my predecessor, took over in 2010, he asked me to be an assistant Provincial Grand Master.
I see.
So I then had 2 group reps who worked with me, and I had the Isle of Wight and I had Botley and Woolston groups, and then I was an assistant Provincial Grand Master for 7 years.
Oh wow, it's a long journey.
It's a long journey.
Yeah.
2 years then as deputy, so I was the deputy, and then I took over in 2020, straight into COVID. So yeah.
Oh wow. So there's a couple of points that stick out to me, and it's. Sometimes they're obvious and sometimes they're not. One is being open to say yes to when somebody asks you to do something. Hey, why not? You'll gain the skills. You'll inherently have mentorship, because that's one thing that sometimes we forget. I'm like, oh, this is going to rest on my shoulders. I don't know what I'm doing. And most likely you know what you're doing. We've all been there where we're inexperienced, and that's why we're in Freemasonry, that we have older brethren that will tutor us. They'll help us. But also being a self-starter, I think if you want to, Freemasonry is where if you want to see a change, you could actually make it. You can actually do it, as long as it's a sound plan. And another really important point that you said that I really haven't heard many people talk about, and I'm so glad you said this about imposter syndrome. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, sometimes I am I'm just really afraid of sometimes presenting in my own lodge, or I'm going to mess up the ritual, or why am I even asked to do this? And you know what? It's going to be all right. It's fine. And if you mess up, it doesn't matter, because you have so many other opportunities to perfect it. And I'm glad you said that, because I think sometimes younger brethren, especially new initiates, I see it in the messages. I hear it in the conversations with them. They are afraid, and that's something that if new initiates are hearing, it's okay. And we were all there. We're all scared. We're all afraid. It will get better. Just ask questions. Practice makes perfect. And I think that's a message that a lot of us need to hear, even sometimes reminded of.
Roddy, I make mistakes all the time. And the difference is I know how to deal with it. But I didn't. And what Freemasonry has taught me, it's taught me confidence. And it's given me confidence. And I have to say, in my working life, in my voluntary life outside of Masonry, all the different things that we do, if you take on responsibility, it does grow you in confidence. And also you can watch and see, you can learn skills, you can learn off people. You know, I'm a great talker, but I'm also a great listener. So you listen and you watch other people, and you can then evolve your own style. You know, one of the most frightening things I have to do every year is install the master of the Provincial Grand Stewards Lodge. So I've got 300 guys in red aprons at the Novotel who are brilliant ritualists. I call myself an average ritualist, okay. And I've got 300 sets of eyes watching me to install the master of Provincial Stewards Lodge, because that's what the PGM does. And I know there are a few waiting for me to make a mistake. All right? And I may lose out, leave a word out. I may start off on a different line. I do have someone ready to prompt me, which is an innovation in Provincial Stewards Lodge, I can tell you, because we never used to. They used to leave you hanging, but they don't do that anymore. And I'm not worried. I suppose the confidence that I've gained through Masonry and in life to say, you know, if I make a mistake, and I will make a mistake, it's not deliberate. It's not for the want of not trying.
Yes.
But it's actually, sometimes it lightens the moment.
Completely.
Because it is a very stressful situation, a lodge meeting, and it can be, particularly if you're in the chair for the first time. The second, third or fourth time you've done the chair, it becomes more relaxing. But, you know, we're there again to give the candidate, be it someone brand new to Masonry, or be it the Master of Stewards Lodge who's experienced, to give them a great evening. But, you know, if we don't smile and don't enjoy it, what's the point?
Agreed.
And I go to Stewards Lodge and I marvel at their excellence in ritual. But I can feel the tension in the room. So when I take the chair, I do try and lighten that mood, because if I lighten the mood, then other people relax.
Just relax.
But yeah, and chairing the annual general meeting since I moved it to London, you know, we had 1,000 guys
That was amazing.
in Great Queen Street.
It was fantastic.
You know, and I'm stood outside those big bronze doors and I'm thinking, well, I signed up for this. Yeah. And actually, I've got to make it work, haven't I?
It was perfect. It was the first one I've been to, and I'm so glad it's in London.
It's some
just
fun,
gives it a
right?
different feel. Meet all those different guys from our province, which is like, wow, look at this whole entire hall is filled. And you know, you did a fantastic job. All the brethren did. It was a fantastic day out.
It's a team. The whole thing is a team effort. Whereas a lodge, it's about master, secretary, DC, treasurer, all the officers. It's exactly the same in the province.
Yes.
We couldn't do it. I couldn't do it without that team. You know, my provincial cabinet, which is my assistant PGM's deputy, but the provincial secretariat, the provincial DCs, you know, and then all the people behind the scenes, you know, the treasurers, the almoners, we have exactly the same setup as there are in lodges. And these guys give willingly of their time. And so my view is this, that I have to be the best I can be because they deserve that. You know, and if you're privileged to lead, you could, you know, it is a privilege to lead. And I always end with that on my AGM address. This is a huge privilege. You know, as the PGM, you can appoint your officers, you can promote people, you can appoint your assistant provincial Grand Master and your deputy, but you can't promote someone to PGM. That's done by Grand Lodge.
I see.
So Grand Lodge appoint the Provincial Grand Master for every province. And they look at the recommendations, they look at the people in the province, and the sitting PGM will make a recommendation, and then it's up to Grand Lodge whether or not they take it. So every year I do an annual report, and in that report I have to put names of people who could succeed me if I go under the bus tomorrow.
I see.
And that succession planning we do at provincial level and Grand Lodge level, and you know we're doing the same in lodges.
And now looking back in your trajectory and how Freemasonry was when you were 21 until now, what changes have there been? I mean, I can't imagine. We're living through change now, and I think it's very positive.
Sure.
But I'm quite curious.
I mean, some are really obvious. You know, when I joined, we only had one tie. It was a black tie.
Okay.
We didn't have, you know, I've got about 30 different ties, you know, because there are lodge ties and specialist lodge ties, and different orders have their own ties. We all wore a black tie, and it was simple. You know, life was simpler like that. The things that have changed, I think that the biggest thing is we have become more inclusive as an organisation, much more inclusive. And that's really important. That is really, really important. I think we've become more relaxed where it's appropriate to be more relaxed. So I am a traditionalist in terms, I still want the ceremonial ritual to be good for the candidate, as I've said. But the festive board, the committees, the time in the bar should be more relaxed. They should be more sociable. And I think we are more sociable. My mother lodge had one event a year, which was the ladies' night. And it's old hat. I mean, very few lodges just have a ladies' night anymore. In fact, they don't. They have a lodge dinner. You know, there are more socials now than ever. Barbecues, fundraisers, you know, out with the guys and the partners for curries. You know, that's changed hugely.
Okay.
That's really changed hugely. And I think for the better. So Freemasonry has to become more sociable. And I think it has, they've recognised that because life is different. COVID was tough, and coming out of COVID, you know, we did lose a lot of members in COVID. But interestingly, our figures are coming right back up. But I think COVID talked about isolation, and what Freemasonry offers is this inclusivity. And it's up to each lodge and each member to make sure other members feel included, you know?
I love that you hit that point. For obvious reasons, my accent's not from the UK.
Sure.
I'm American. I moved to the UK about 4.5 years ago. And it was quite difficult to make friends. I don't think it was the cultural difference or anything. It's just the age group that we're in. People are working and all those things, and people are busy. And it was COVID as well. But since I've joined Freemasonry, it's just been one of the most amazing things to happen for my living and journey in the UK, because I feel I have a community. And so many people are lacking that, and so many men are lacking that right now. And for me, Freemasonry is so relevant for any guy, whether they're 18 or joining at 65, because life has been so busy. Men are so isolated right now. So it's important that we tell that message, those stories to guys that actually could benefit from it.
And I think that's what, you know, your point is so relevant, because I think that's what we can offer. You know, life is crazy. Social media, mobile phones, we're never off duty.
Ever.
You know, when I was working in those days, when the Royal Mail delivered the post and you dealt with the post at work, that was it. There's no post till tomorrow. But now the emails come in 24/7.
24/7.
You know, the phone calls come in 24/7. So what we offer, we can offer an oasis of, I don't want to say calm, because people misconstrue. If you're the Master of Lodge, you've got to do a second or third degree tonight. We're not calm. But we can offer a different physical environment, can't we?
Yes,
We can
you
walk
can.
the door shuts, there's no mobile
Agreed.
phone, and we switch off.
It's a different space. And you know, I've never thought of it like that. An oasis. It is an oasis. You're going to have some interesting challenges because of, you know, you want to present your ritual perfectly, and maybe you fib it up, and, you know, whatever, it's okay. And, you know, you have somebody prompt you, but that takes you away from the chaos of your outside life, meaning work, traffic, news, things that are happening in the world. It is an oasis, and also the camaraderie, right, that we're missing now because of modern lifestyle. And so, again, it's a privilege to be a Freemason, and I wish and I hope that if we can, in a perfect world, every male could have that experience of having the camaraderie when you get out of university, when you get out of, being a young man, because unfortunately that ends because we have responsibilities, right? And I like that. I like the term, the oasis, a lot.
But, you mentioned about isolation. I think, we didn't get some members back post-COVID. And, understandably, people who get to a stage where they want different things, they want to do
Absolutely.
things. However, I think, it's down to every member to sort of, we talk about caring for our brethren. And for me, it's back to basics. When you're initiated, you sort of go through this process where you encourage to look after one another. And I mean in a welfare and fraternal sense. And I don't think sometimes we're very good at that. I think sometimes it's very easy to expect the almoner or the secretary or someone else to keep
Yes.
but the people I've brought in as candidates, friends of mine I've brought in, I see that as a responsibility with me.
Yeah.
So I brought my latest candidate I brought in 2 years ago. And I make sure that I go to the meeting that he is at. I make sure that, I went through the words with him so he knew what he was doing, preparation for the next ceremony. I make sure I take him to Grand Lodge so he's looked around the museum and I've taken him to see the different ceremonies. So I think it's incumbent on all of us, if we bring someone in, to have an obligation to look after them. It's not someone else's job.
Yeah.
That's our own responsibility.
Guilty as charged. I mean, I'm going to reach out to a brother this weekend. I haven't spoken in a while, just to see how they are, just like you said. And if you guys, I'll challenge you hearing this, just send a message, just hello to one of your guys in your lodge, because it's important, because you're right. Sometimes we do forget and we take it for granted that, oh yeah, now, my lodge, I'll see them next meeting. And sometimes that message will make a big difference. And I saw that this weekend when I was in the Isle of Wight, and I ran into a brother, and he was the captain of the Red Funnel Ferries. And it was so cool. It was just like, and he, I saw his face light up, because he hasn't been able to attend meetings because of his schedule. But it was, for him, it was just a connection to his lodge. And likewise for me, it was like, oh my God, look, this is one of my brother, I'm seeing it outside the lodge. And of course he invited us to the bridge, which was so cool to see that. But it reminded him that he's part of this, this greater organization that, he's appreciated and included. And like, hey, I'm going to see you next meeting. We're always there. And he's the almoner, but he just hasn't been able to come. So, and sometimes, you can feel distance from your lodge because of modern life. But I think that message is important. Just send that text or that call.
And the danger is you get out of practice of going.
Yeah.
And once you stop going, it's quite hard to get back in. So
Absolutely.
you need your friends to say, come on, I haven't seen you here, buddy, for a while,
Agreed.
And a bit of encouragement.
Agreed. And that's a wrap on part 1 of our conversation with the Provincial Grand Master. In the next episode, we'll explore some intriguing topics. What does the future of Freemasonry look like in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight? What is the state of the province? And what personal stories has he collected along the way? Don't miss out. Tune in to hear the answers in part 2.